Judy, a film about Judy Garland, one of the legendary actresses of the early Hollywood, and known mostly, I think, for her teenage role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, and of course the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I went to see it yesterday, and honestly, right after, I thought it was a little bit underwhelming. That it was a decent movie at best, although with a terrific central performance by Renée Zellweger. However, I slept on it, and now I think it's actually better than I gave it credit for. And it has to do with expectations, I think, in much the same way I experienced First Man not so long ago. In that case, I expected a space exploration movie. With Judy, I expected a musical biopic. But in both cases, those movies were actually pretty heavy character studies. And as those character studies, I think they succeed. So the way the story is framed here is that we meet Garland towards the end of the 1960s, when she's close to 50 years old. She's a washed-up artist trying to make ends meet and keep custody of her kids while doing poor-paying gigs across America. As she herself says at one point, she has trouble getting real jobs because she's uninsurable and unreliable. And all the while she's doing with substance abuse. Drugs, alcohol, cigarettes are ever present with Judy. And when trouble hits hard, she reluctantly accepts the offer to go to London for a few weeks to do shows at a club called The Talk of the Town. We get to follow her through her ups and downs over the course of those weeks, and mixed in between, there are several dreamlike flashback sequences to her time as a child actor that give us glimpses of how inhumanely mistreated she was back then. The MGM studio and mayor especially treated her like a slave and a golden hen at the same time. She was almost starved to maintain her figure. She was not allowed to get enough sleep or social life or time off in general. And as early as her teenage years, she became addicted to various substances that basically kept her going. And so in the present day of the film, we get to see the results and the toll it's all taken on her after all those decades. So first things first, as is the case in such films, the whole thing stands on the central performance, and I'm very happy to say that Renée Zellweger is captivating as Judy. She completely disappears into the role, so much so that my friend who I went to see it with didn't believe me initially that it was her afterwards. I think she does a terrific job of showing Garland as a complicated, layered person, not just a train wreck of a failed artist, but also not just a victim of her circumstances. She's not defined by one single thing. She feels like a real human being with some great traits, but also some great flaws. Zellweger also sang all of the songs that we see in the movie and has done so in an impressive way, especially if you consider that she's essentially playing another character singing, and sometimes she has to do a genuinely good and impressive job, but there are moments where she has to play a poor performance as well. And I think mainly thanks to her, the movie manages to hit the emotional marks, even if it does end up being a little bit cheesy towards the end. And cheesiness is not the least of the movie's problems as well. I think that would have to be really uneven editing. And it was really baffling to me because there are several scenes which are shot really, really well. The opening flashback on the set of Wizard of Oz is done in a creative way with a long take and the camera moving through the set, following the characters. The first of the London performances is also shot as a single take throughout the entire first song and just pulls you into the film completely. And on the other hand, we have multiple times in the film where there were really clunky cuts, you could maybe even say unnecessary. I think the perfect example is a scene where Garland ends up at a fan's house one night after the performance. And there's a scene which is shot kind of from the side, and you have the men sitting at the piano on the left playing, and on the right hand side you have Judy singing, sitting kind of off to the side with a drink and a little bit behind the man and singing. She's facing the camera with a glass in her hand, and you have this whole take which goes on for almost a minute, I think, where the camera doesn't move and just sits patiently, letting us enjoy the moment. And both characters are in the frame, both faces are visible with the swaths of emotions on both of them. And then moments later, as the moment lasts, right towards the end of the scene, there is a hard cut to the close-up of the face of the man at the piano, from almost the same angle and showing us basically the same thing we just saw in the wider plane. And then 4 seconds later, there's another cut, this time to a close-up of Judy. Again, same thing, similar angle, nothing new, nothing added to the scene. And I couldn't help but wonder why. Why would you cut instead of letting the moment just play out naturally till the end, with the perfect shot that you have already found. The cuts add nothing new to the picture, no new information, no new angle. They're not as pretty as the original one, just a weird editing decision. And it may sound like a really small detail that I'm picking on now, but that same thing happens multiple times in the film, and it really took me out of it. And I think those types of things were the reason why I initially thought the film was just decent. But ultimately, I think they are all forgivable. And so is the easy sentimentality towards the end. Because even with all those missteps, I think the film does a really good job of painting that portrait of this interesting character. And really, I do think it's worth seeing, even if it's just for Zellweger's performance, because it is spectacular.